Hey everyone, I'm back. Can you hear me? All right, awesome. Sorry about that. My internet went down. Wouldn't you know it? Thank you so much for hanging in there. All right, so let's pick up where we were. Okay, so in 2019, there's a lawsuit filed against NAR Anywhere Realty, which is Caldwell Banker, Sotheby's, Century 21, Keller Williams, Remax, and Berkshire Hathaway, claiming price fixing and conspiracy. Then in 2019, there's another suit filed in Missouri against the same folks claiming the same thing again. Then we move forward to 2023 and MLS PIN, right? So that is the MLS in Massachusetts is sued by the Justice Department over the mandatory offer of compensation, and they basically settle. They basically settle and they remove that, right? So we've all heard since, the verdict, right, that it is possible for the buyer, for the listing agent to put zero in the MLS. So that was forced by the Justice Department when MLS PIN lost. They made that change, and then NAR makes the change in all the other MLSs throughout the country. Then we still in 2023, September, Remax settles, Anywhere Realty settles, right? NAR, Keller Williams, Berkshire Hathaway, they fight on, right? Now we come to October 31st of 2023, and the jury rules, and they rule against NAR, Keller Williams, and Berkshire Hathaway, and they award 1.87 billion, right? The verdict was going to be appealed. They were awarded treble damages, so it got to be like a 5.5 billion, crazy number, right? And then in February of this year, Keller Williams, they settle for 70 million, and then last Friday, NAR settles for 418 million, right? So all that is left now, kind of, fighting on is Berkshire Hathaway, and we imagine it's only amount of time before they settle. All right, what does the proposed NAR settlement mean for us? All right, so here are the key changes, right? So the buyer agent compensation fields, right, are going to be removed from the MLS. There isn't a set date. They said 4 months, so sometime, the middle of July. I'm sure they're going to tell us and let us know. There'll be time, right? Well, they are going to be gone. They're not going to be there anymore. You will not know, if you are the buyer's agent, what that listing is offering for compensation. Additionally, none of the data. So if you were to go on Zillow or Redfin, you could see on the listing, the public could see how much the buyer's agent was being paid. That is no longer going to be happening. No one will know. The only way you are going to find out is when you call a listing agent and you ask them. Next, it is going to be mandatory, right? Mandatory that on any listing agreement and any buyer's broker agreement, it is going to explicitly tell them that commissions are negotiable and they are not set by state law. It's always been that way. Nothing is changing. It's just going to be more in the face of the consumer, right? It will be right there, as I imagine, as part of the listing agreement and as part of the buyer's broker agreement. All right, this next one is a big one, right? So when you're working with a buyer and you work with that buyer, you have to get a buyer broker agreement right from the beginning. right? You have to have it. And again, if you think about it, it makes sense. You want to have that, right? Because no one wants to work for free. We're not going to show a buyer properties and then not get compensated for that, right? So the buyer will tell us how much, and this is going to be a negotiation between you as the buyer's agent and your buyer, how much they are going to pay you, right? Now, again, let's just say it's 2.5%. We'll use that. Now, again, the seller still can make payment to you as the buyer's agent. So it is not like, oh, it is guaranteed or it is 100% that buyer is now going to have to pay you 2.5%. No, it could have gone that way, but it didn't. It could have been, they could have made it illegal for the seller to pay anything to the buyer, brokers, the buyer's agent. They didn't do that, right? They did not do that. So it is still possible, and I think it will be still the prevalent way. Most sellers will compensate the buyer's agent. Now, again, they may compensate only 2%, and you have a buyer broker agreement that's 2.5%. The buyer is going to have to pay that other 0.5%. We are not able to state or ever say, right, as a buyer's agent, your services are free. And I touched upon this last bullet, seller, and I think this is very important, seller can still compensate buyer's agent, right? They can still do that. Now, you're not going to know, right, when you show that client that property, right, if they are or not. But again, if you have the buyer broker agreement, which you have to have, you're going to get paid by them. If the seller is paying you, then that amount the seller pays is going to be subtracted from what the buyer is ending up having to pay you. All right, so opportunity is knocking. We got this, right? This is a good thing, right? It is good because it's going to clear the air, right? We're not going to have lawsuits hanging over our head, right? We are coming to a place where everything is going to be known, and those that are strong agents are going to do well. All right. So what I'm seeing out there now, and this is going to die down, but there is a lot of false information out there, right? I'm sure you've been hearing it. It's in the media. It's on TikTok. It is everywhere, right? And what are we hearing? The 6% listing commission is dead. That is not true. That is not true. It is still possible for an agent to be paid 3% for me, 3% for the buyer's agent, right? Sellers can still agree to that. Maybe it's 4% for the listing agent, 2% for the buyer's agent, or maybe it's 2% for the listing agent, 4% for the, right? Whatever, but it's all going to be negotiated. So that statement I've been hearing, 6% listing commission dead, that's untrue. That's wrong. Overall, commissions to be reduced by 30 to 50%. Heard that numerous times. No one knows. No one knows, right? I personally don't think that's going to happen at all. And I'm going to tell you why in a bit, right? So that again is just hysteria, hype, you know, TV shows, it's all driven by sensationalism, right? And that's kind of what we're hearing. 50% of realtors, 1 million agents will be departing the industry. Again, just false statements, dramatization. No one knows, right? No one knows at this time what will happen. In fact, this may not affect us all that much at all, right? Because before, we talked about, the mandatory offer of compensation, the mandatory offer of compensation going away. I went through over the weekend and I looked at about 200 listings I didn't find any, not one that had zero. And this has been in effect for probably now 5 months, not one. Not one had zero that I looked at. Maybe there's some, but if there are, it is a very, very, very small percentage, probably less than 1%. I didn't find one. Again, why does a seller compensate a buyer's agent? Why? Because they want to get their house sold. They want to attract buyers and buyer's agents to their property. So again, don't listen to what you're hearing in the media. So much of it is hype and so much of it is inaccurate. All right, so on the listing side, what do we got to do? What do we got to do? All right, you got to have a killer listing presentation, right? You know, again, all this is good, right? This is all about transparency, communicating, letting sellers know what our value is. You know, agents, there are agents out there, and I like to lump them into this category. They want to do the least amount of work to get that commission. Those agents are going to have difficulty. Those agents are going to have difficulty because now it is going to be more competitive, right? It's going to be more competitive. So you really need to have that great listing presentation. We've got a downloadable presentation, up on Join Dalton Wade in the collateral section. It's pretty good. You can edit it, modify it, but you got to have that. And again, you're going to have to every single time to that seller explain your value proposition. Here's another one that I really picked up on when I was out in production, and I did a lot with for sale by owners, right? And they would talk about the commission, right? You'd hear about the commission. So again, it's not the commission, right? It's not the commission that is important. What's really important, right, is what's important is what that seller receives at closing, right? What they receive at closing. All right, let me share my screen again. Hold on. All right, so sure we're able to see that again. So again, right, it's not the commission, right? It's what they're going to receive. I remember, working with a guy, and, I was their buyer's agent, and we went to a for sale by owner. The guy didn't know how to price his home. He priced his home $50,000 under what it was worth. Yeah, I didn't pay a commission, at least on the listing side, but he shortchanged himself, right? That's what a good agent does. They're going to help that buyer buy that house for the least amount of money possible. And for that seller, they are going to, help them get the most money, right? So, and again, we need to explain what our role is, right? What our role is as the listing agent and what role the buyer's agent plays. Again, I think a lot of this stems from people really not knowing, what we do, right? What we do, how we work, right? It all is kind of, they're not in the transaction. They're not seeing how difficult this is, how hard it is to get to the finish line sometimes, right? So again, we're going to discuss in detail what your commission is and what the buyer's commission is, right? And why that seller is best off offering a commission to the buyer's agent, because it's going to bring more people potentially to their listing. And then ultimately, we still have to explain that there is no requirement to compensate a buyer's agent, right? But It's going to weaken the demand, right? Somebody's going to call you up and you're going to say, hey, they're going to ask you, are you offering anything? And, they potentially are going to tell you no, right? Maybe, that buyer doesn't want to look at that house. Maybe they can't. So it could weaken the demand. All right, on the buyer side, obviously this is going to impact buyer's agents a bit more, right? All right, so you're going to have that signed buyer broker agreement before any showings. Again, think of this though, right? I read an article. His name's Steve Reynolds. Steve was Dalton Wade agent, is nice enough to send this to me, and I checked it out. And this guy, he's like, this is all good, right? This is not doom and gloom. This is good. Have you ever worked with a buyer and they're working with 4 other agents? Right? That definitely went on when it was like during the pandemic. They're just going from agent to agent. They don't care. That's going to end. That's going to end because now you're going to have a contract with them saying they are exclusively working with you, right? So now you don't have to worry. Oh, they stopped calling me. Oh, did they find another agent? Did they dump me? No, that can't happen now, right? Because you have a signed agreement with them, right? Ask yourself, do you want to spend time with a buyer who's unable or unwilling to pay you? I don't want to do that. This is better. This is better, right? But again, you got to communicate. You got to explain the services you provide, right? Via that buyer presentation. Explain what it costs and why, what you're going to do, right? Seller has representation, right? You as buyer, you need representation as well. I've seen buyers that work directly with the listing agent get abused, pay way too much, overpay. So you're going to communicate that to your buyers, right? They would be at a disadvantage going it alone or working with the seller's agent. The seller's agent, again, in Florida, if they're a transaction broker, they're supposed to be neutral, but are they really neutral? Their original client was the seller. That's who their allegiance is to. And again, got to communicate this. There is still a very high probability, because again, I went through all those listings, as I mentioned, and there was not one that I could find where, and again, the ability for an agent, a listing agent, to offer 0 has been in play now for 6 months. I didn't see any, not a one, because it's not in the seller's best interest, right? So you're going to communicate that to your buyer that, in fact, most listings, even though you're not going to know because all that information is now not available, most listing agents and sellers, and maybe, close to who knows what percent, but a very high percent, are still going to offer compensation for a buyer's agent bringing their client by. This last one is big, right? You're not just opening doors as a buyer's agent. If that's what you do, then you should probably depart. If that's how you're thinking about this, you're going to communicate to them that you have a full understanding of that contract, right? That contract can be tricky. You're going to be on top of all the dates, and you are experienced and you know how to get them to close and to make it as stress-free a process as possible. That is where the sales is now going to come in. People would say, I hear this in my recruiting efforts. Oh, I'm a good salesperson. I'm a good salesperson, meaning you're going to sell somebody a house. That is BS. Nobody sells anybody a house. That buyer has to want to buy that house. But now there is going to be some salesmanship. And that is in selling you, selling yourself, communicating to that buyer how you are going to help them, how you're going to save them money, and how you're going to get them to the closing table. All right. Kind of interjected a few thoughts in here, but I'm going to kind of give them to you now, a little more, succinct way. Change is hard. right? Change is hard. This is not going to be easy. We're going to be in kind of this sort of, quasi state where, it hasn't really changed, but we know it's coming. So the next 3 or 4 months, again, you're going to hear about this, but I would get in the habit, right, of you're working with a buyer, get that buyer agreement signed now, start implementing it now, today, right? Not right when things change, sooner rather than later, right? Again, but the new system is going to be better, right? It's going to be better for you as an agent, provided you are an agent that has your act together, you're a strong agent, you actually help people. You help people. I know there are agents out there, they don't do that. They're just, as I said, they are just there to do the least amount of work to get that commission. That is over. Those days are gone. So you really need to explain your value. So we don't know, we've heard some things about, things, how much commission dollars are going to be lost, 30 to 50%. I don't believe that's happening at all. I think in the end, it will be a very small amount, and I'm going to tell you why in a bit. That actually disappears, right? So that pool of commissions, right, I think is going to go down not so much, very little, right? But there might be some things we see, right? We could see flat fee buyer agent models. So instead of getting 2%, 2.5%, 2.25%, 2.75%, you're going to say to that buyer, hey, I'm going to charge you $7,500, or I'm going to charge you $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever you deem appropriate for your business model. Dalton Wade has always been and will continue to be a platform for agents to do their business. You guys are all independent contractors. Again, and I know this, there are brokerages out there. You don't get 6%, you don't take that listing. They are told exactly what to charge, and some of them have no flexibility at all. Some of them, oh, we can go to 5%. Those days, again, are over, right? So that you could see more flat fee models, right? I'm a buyer's agent. I earn $7,500, right? Again, you have to come up with your own strategy, your own pricing based on what your value proposition is. Here's an interesting one that haven't heard anybody talk about, but it could happen. It could happen. We could see sellers, right? It kind of, everything we hear in the news is anti-buyer's agent, I talked to my attorney. She kind of took me through this. I kind of asked her thoughts. She says it's going to be harder for buyer's agents. Okay, that might be true. But maybe what it'll be is people will now not want to pay listing agents, right? Oh, I'm only going to pay you 1%, and I'm going to give 3% to that buyer's agent because I want that buyer's agent to bring their client. Who knows, right? But the point for you guys is you have to think through what you think is best. We could also see listing agents try to earn the entire commission. They're still out there charging 5 or 6% and offering nothing. Please do not do that. Please do not do that. You can do it because at Dalton Wade can do what you want pretty much, but that would not be something that I would find good, right? But I think some unscrupulous listing agents might try that. Might try to get the entire commission for themselves. This last bullet is an interesting one. So in Washington state, these kind of policies, not exactly the same, have been in place for about 4 years. They already did this in Washington state. Guess what? No noticeable reduction in commissions. No noticeable reductions in commissions. This is what the public thinks, the uninformed public. Realtor, free money. Yeah, you try doing the job. You try going out there. You try working with sellers that are unrealistic about what their home is going to sell for or what a buyer will pay, right? Or all of that. But the takeaway is that, at least in Washington State, with some similar laws in place to what's coming our way, there was no real reduction in commissions. Pretty interesting. So we're hoping that's kind of what happened. All right. Again, clears the air going forward, right? Again, we had sort of the settlement, we've got the verdict, we're kind of in this sort of no man's land. Well, now we're out of no man's land. As soon as we know what's coming, and as soon as it comes, it is over. It is over. We are free to go and do business. People need us. Sellers need us. Buyers need us, right? They only need us, though, if we are good at what we do. We got to up our game. All right. I know I'm going to get this question, right? Because we've heard about brokerages leaving NAR, right? Leaving NAR. Okay, so the brokerages that we're hearing about leaving NAR, right? Remax, Redfin, right? They were on the news. They're not being part of NAR. Well, that's not happening in Florida. They're leaving NAR in states, right? Like Massachusetts, where you don't have to be part of NAR to be part of the MLS. That is nothing is changing around our relationship with the local board, the state of Florida Realtors, or NAR. So if you are part of NAR, right, and you're in Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, some other markets that we're in, if you're part of NAR, if you're part of an MLS that is affiliated with NAR, nothing is changing. NAR will be providing new forms, as will the Florida Realtors, right? Those are coming to make sure we are in compliance with the settlement. Now, again, the settlement hasn't been signed. There's nothing to make us believe that it's not going to be signed, right? So it is coming. We put up in the Facebook group earlier today, right, this morning, the entire settlement agreement. So you can, if you want to, fall asleep easy tonight, you can start reading it because it is lengthy and, somewhat legalese. And then we did strip out the one section that tells about the changes, right? So you want to read that and make sure you're aware of them. Again, it's imperative, right, that for both buyers and sellers, that we explain what we are going to provide for them and how we are being compensated, right? And then I have to stress this because, again, we feel, it seems like the most pressure, and it could be, it may not be, we don't know, but the most pressure potentially is coming on the buyer agent side, right? Dalton Wade's business is 60% buyer agent, 40% listing side, right? So we're a little heavier on the buyer side, right? But again, it is critical that you explain to them what you do, right? You're not just opening doors. You have a full understanding of the contract, right? You're able to, guide them on a complicated transaction, right? You're on top of the dates, right? And that you are going to get them to closing and it is going to be a positive experience. All right, so let me look at the chat. All right, so let me scroll back up top. I'm sure we have a lot of questions. Let's see. Let me start here. And all right, hold on. Go through them. If you have any and you haven't typed them in, type them in now. We're going to go through them, spend a little time here. Let's see. All right, what happens with the listings that are already active? This is from Stella. How you doing, Stella? I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure they're being taken out. There will be once this goes into effect, we will hear what date is going into effect. There will be no more, cooperating broker information on the listing. It's all, you won't be able to enter it if it's a new listing, and the listings that are there, it is going to be removed, right? Again, potentially positive, right? Because now because like on Zillow, Redfin, all that information was publicly available for the entire world. It's not going to be there, right? That information is now going to be between you, buyer's agent, and the listing agent. Period. That's only ones that are going to know. All right, let's see. On. We have Christina and Chris. How are you, Christina? Can we have our buyer sign the buyer broker agreement, putting the offer instead of no? Nope. I mean, you can do that now, but as soon as this takes effect, you cannot show them a property, right, without that buyer broker agreement being signed. And you wouldn't want to. You wouldn't want to. Here's why you don't want to, because if they like that property, right, and then they say to you, I'm not signing it, then you still got to put the offer in. Got to put the offer in. So you want to know, I'm going to get paid no matter what happens. Either the buyer is going to pay me, and I know that for certain, right? So again, the takeaway, it's right in the settlement. Can't be showing somebody a property without that buyer broker agreement. All right. Jill Chen says, good grief. Many listing agents do not answer the phone for showings and questions. Imagine when you also have to call them for commissions. I know that's going to be extra work, for the buyer's agent, right? I mean, but again, you're going to have to do that. You're going to have to find out. And the takeaway, and again, maybe you don't have to call until you put the offer in, because you've already got the buyer broker agreement signed. So you're getting paid, right? You're getting paid. And then if your client likes the house, you're going to call them up. You're going to say, hey, I'm thinking of putting in an offer. Are you offering any buyer broker compensation? If they say yes, you let your seller know, you let your buyer know, right? And you're going to be paid part of that. Again, maybe the buyer, they've talked about prices coming down because of this. That's not going to happen. Maybe now your buyer maybe they were going to offer, $395, but now they got to pay you 10 grand. They're only going to offer 385. We have to see. It's going to be very interesting. Hey, Joanna, good to see you. Absolutely. The VA does not allow buyers to pay a fee. So how will this work? We just won't get paid. Great question, Sarah. Hard to know. Hard to know. Again, I haven't heard anything recently, but there was talk, and hopefully it's still out there, where the ability for the the buyer to roll into, their financing your commission. That would be awesome. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Hope that happens. That would be great. Interesting. Hey, Robert, that's a great question. I'd like to know how this will affect with builders. Again, again, hard to know, but maybe what we'll see, instead of it being, 2%, 3%, it's going to be a flat fee, 5,000, 7,500, something like that. And then your buyer has to make up the difference. Again, builders, we do a lot of new construction, right? Sometimes those are some of the easier transactions we get to do. It can be very profitable, maybe not so much now. So you're going to have to kind of talk with your buyer what you're going to do. Now, again, I think those, new construction, a little bit more challenging potentially, because there isn't quite the amount of work done. Let's see. Jason says, I didn't know that the buyer percent is being taken out of the MLS. I just thought it was an option. That is where we stand now, Jason. Right now, it is still there. The seller has the ability to offer zero. We're not seeing really any zeros. I mean, I don't know if anybody else, you guys are looking at the listings probably more than me, but no, the takeaway is that the all the buyer agent compensation is gone. It's gone. It is being taken away. It will not appear, and it will not be in any public domain. I don't know. It's interesting. Hey, Shannon, good to see you. Thank you. I don't know. Like, it's interesting. when it was busy, right, Lennar went down to 1%, and then if you did a few houses, they increased it. Um, but now they're back. They're offering the full commission again. Why? Times are slower, right? Times are slower. So I don't know if that in fact is going to happen. We'll have to see. All right, Claudia, how are you? What is the seller is paying more? Does it change to the larger amount or stay the same? What do you mean by paying more? I mean, I'm scrolling through these questions, so I may not get to it, but um, again, if they're paying more than what you've agreed with the buyer's agent, then when you sign the buyer broker agreement, then you're only going to get what you signed on the buyer broker agreement. You will not get extra. So say, for instance, you agreed with the buyer, that you're going to be charging them, let's say 7,500, the house is 400 grand and the seller's offering 2.5%, that would be 10 grand. You are going to only receive the lesser amount, at least as it's written right now. Is it a concession? If so, will that not mess with the max allowed for loan? Again, so you're still able to, if you're the listing agent, you can still enter in the realtor remarks and the public remarks that the seller is willing to offer a concession, right? That is still allowed. So that is not being taken away. All that's being taken away is the actual data showing the buyer's agent how much compensation they're getting. All right, Donna says, so if we have them sign a buyer's agreement, they will pay 2.5, and then the home they decide on, the seller is offering 2.5, then I can go with the seller paying me instead. Absolutely, right? So again, my opinion, could be wrong, right? I still see the vast majority of sellers, right? The seller wants to sell their house, right? They want buyers to come. Incentivizing the buyer's agent to do that by paying them part of the commission, that does it. That is still legal. So yes, if the seller is offering 2.5%, then the seller is going to be the one paying you, not the buyer. So again, when you're communicating to your buyer, when you're getting them to sign that buyer broker agreement, right? Again, depending on the house, they may end up not having to come out of pocket at all, which, could be the majority of cases. We don't know. Let's see, developers and builders are going to have a field day. Hard to know. I mean, possibly. I mean, again, let's hope not. Let's hope, they're still willing to compensate us. We will find out, again, if not, then, the buyer's going to have to compensate us, or, it's not going to end up being the house for them. Thank you. Thank you, Liz. Yep, the buyer broker agreement needs to be signed right before the showing, not after it happens. And again, you want to have a consultation with your buyer. You want to, this is only going to make us more professional, more communicative, more transparent. This is what I take exception with NAR, right? They've done a terrible job explaining what we do. That is my opinion. They they facilitated this system that in the end got taken down. Got taken down. Obviously, they're not admitting any guilt, but in the end, it kind of now seems like, hey, it was all illegal, right? It's all illegal. It wasn't set up correctly. That's what they did. That's what they did. So now, you're going to pay a big fine, which comes probably out of our dues, right? So, but absolutely want to have that buyer broker agreement signed before, we show them the first house. Hey, area, yes, we will have, we'll have this up on the YouTube channel tomorrow. I'll send out an email, kind of making sure everybody has the link. All right, let's see. Hey, John, how are you? Since the buyer has a contract with the buyer agent that is unknown to the seller and the seller offers to pay the buying agent, why do you have to disclose your income to anyone? Well, you don't. I mean, ultimately, the way to think about this, John, is the most you're going to get is whatever you sign with that buyer, right? So if you sign 3% with them, that is the maximum amount you're going to get, right? If the seller is only offering 2.5%, that's all you're going to get, right? The seller, the buyer's not going to make up the difference, which is different than how it is now. Technically the buyer would have had to pay that. But now the most is going to be what is on that buyer broker agreement. So again, like if you have 3%, right, and the seller's paying 2.5%, you're going to get that last 0.5% from the buyer, right? But again, if you're only charging, 7,500, right, and they're offering you 2.5%, and that's more than 7,500, you're only going to get the 7,500. Hey, Elise, thank you. No, no, we will not be able to do that, Claudia. No, no, no. No, no. And the reason why, if you think about this, the reason why they're doing what they're doing is because of steering, right? And again, to the best of my knowledge in Florida, you can't sort the listings by the commission paid. But obviously in other MLSs you could, and that was problematic, right? So realtors are going, I mean, it's human nature. You're going to go after the one that's going to pay you the most. And you might steer your client there and not show them something to their detriment, right? That's gone away. That's going away. That's why they've eliminated this. So there really can't be any steering anymore, because if you kind of walk through the steps, right? You've got that buyer broker agreement signed. You're going to get paid by the buyer, right? If the seller's offering zero, then the buyer's paying it all. If the seller's offering, 2% and your buyer broker agreement is 2.5%, 2% is going to come from the seller, 1% from the buyer. If your buyer broker agreement is 7,500 and the commission offered by the listing side is, say, 2% of 500,000, 10 grand, and you're going to get 10 grand. Hey, Ellen, great question. We talked about this. We don't know yet. I mean, we're hoping that this changes because obviously VA buyers, and there's a lot of them out there, can't pay any commission, any transaction fees, none of it. So my gut tells me that that's going to change to the positive. People know, again, who's being hurt by this? Who's being hurt? Buyers. Buyers. Because now what they're saying is you're on your own, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, and that's a bad place to be. That is a bad place to be. So hopefully, smarter minds will prevail to let the buyer finance their closing costs, right? They can do that now, and maybe our commissions, can be part of that. Thank you, Corey. How do we get a recording? We're going to put this up on the YouTube channel. Look for that. I'll probably send an email out, with the link. What can we do when the buyer can't afford to pay commission and seller doesn't want to pay? Well, that's where it's a problem, right? That's where it's going to be a problem. Now, technically, you're supposed to still show them the home. Now, again, you have to ask yourself, and again, we're going to learn as time goes on, right? If you're working with a buyer and they say, I can't pay you, I don't want to pay you, I don't understand your value, then do you really want to be working with them? Do you want to take the chance? You might, or you might not. It's up to you, right? Maybe what we find is 99% of the listings still offer compensation. So sure, then you probably, even though you need a buyer broker agreement signed, but maybe you're willing to do it for $500 because you're going to get paid by the seller, and that there's very, very, very few listings out there that don't have compensation for the buyer's agent. Don't know. All right, Melissa, when you say there are many of the, well, I mean, that's obviously the hard part. That's obviously the hard part, right? Is that, some buyers, I mean, sometimes they have difficulty making their closing costs and their down payments. So now we're adding in an extra cost that makes it, especially for that first time home buyer, makes it harder. We'll have to see. Absolutely. Hey, Dennis. Yep. Yep. That is going to be the new playing field. The representation agreement is mandatory. Mandatory. Right? Because what they're trying to do, the crux of this, if you strip it away, is, and again, whether it's right or wrong, that's not for me to decide. Obviously, the court, the jury decided, and it was decided in Kansas City, Missouri, right? I don't know what goes on in Kansas City. Maybe there's five brokerages, that control the entire market there, and they tell all their agents charge 6%. I don't know. I know Florida is very, very competitive. Thank you, Jason. Least amount of work for the most amount of money. Those agents are going to struggle. That's going to be harder. That's going to be harder for them, because again, they may get shaken out. Yeah, I mean, there's a very low cost of entry to be a real estate agent, right? You take your course, your test, you get your MLS dues, you buy some business cards, you're off and running in your own business for $2,000 or less. That's what attracts many people to it. But trust me, there are many people, that end up failing. So we know that there's a high attrition rate. If you've been at this a number of years, you've made it past that harder point, right? You just, again, have to communicate and explain to your sellers and buyers, to both, right? And only time is going to tell what is going to happen and how this ultimately is all going to play out. Hey, Haley. Yep. So our commission will be discussed during a phone call to the listing agent and what then followed up with an email. That is a great question, right? So again, that is still somewhat up in the air in terms of like, what do we actually need, right? And we don't know enough right at this moment. So it's all going to depend on what happens with the listing agreement. So in the listing agreement, if it basically stays somewhat the same, where the listing brokerage, let's use 5%, they get 5% and then they pay 2.5% to the cooperating brokerage. That's right in the listing agreement. We probably don't need much else. If that goes away, right? And then now we're not assured of getting paid, we're going to need a commission agreement. But that we don't know. Those are some of the finer details, that we're going to, learn over the next few months. And again, this is probably the first of many webinars that'll be coming. I mean, that is at least my plan, right? It is not something that, we're going to do this and then we're going to, no, this is important. I got your back. We're on top of this stuff. So this is probably the first of many. Christina says my leads never know how it works. So personally, I think yeah, possibly. I mean, I think that it could be, but the one big difference, Christina, and again, I don't know if you use this, but you're going to have to get that buyer broker agreement, pretty early on, right before you show them the first house. More communication, more transparency. Hey, Lisa, yes, it would still be unethical, but think of it like this. It now isn't going to matter. Why is it not going to matter? Because you're going to have that buyer broker agreement. You are going to have that buyer broker agreement. So you are guaranteed getting paid, no matter whether that listing offers 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4% for the buyer's agent commission. I think that's better. That's better. So the ability to have to steer, or I mean, did I do this? Yeah, the listing's 2%. I skipped over it, right? I mean, or 1% or 1.5%, right? Wasn't even on the tour. That is all taken off the table now because you already know you're going to get paid. no matter what the seller is offering. We'll need to have more than word of mouth for buyer commission from seller. It will have to be a new form between, yeah, exactly. And again, John, as I mentioned, we don't really know exactly how the forms are going to shake out, what's going to be there, but that will become clear as we get closer to sort of, things being implemented. Do we get in trouble if we don't get the buyer broker agreement right? Again, it's supposed to be mandatory. I mean, did they ever call and ask for the listing agreement MLS or no, they don't. So, I mean, but again, where you're going to get in trouble is out of your own pocketbook. You don't have that buyer broker agreement. They like this house, and lo and behold, that house is offering really not much compensation for you. So you want it. You want to have it. Then you're good, right? Then you can show them any house. See how it all kind of works? All right, for 12 years, I've always done buyer broker agreements before I show house. I explain fees and commissions. There you go. Thank you, Elba. Absolutely. Elba's on top of it, right? She's on top of it. She's always used it. I mean, I know agents, they won't take somebody out without it. You gotta communicate. You have to show your value. You have to, that's what this is all meant to do and to clean up. Yeah, right. I mean, I mean, again, like when you kind of, like I personally think like Dalton Wade is kind of the solution, not the problem. But I know, and I'm not going to say where it is in Florida, but I know there's one particular place, right? And it is a good place, but I know, right? I know the commissions are higher there. Why? Less competition and it's controlled, at least it seems to be, and I could be wrong, but it's controlled by 3 or 4 large brokerages that tell their agents, you charge this or you don't take the listing. And that is what is anti-competitive. Competition is good. Competition is what built America. Embrace it. Nicole says, hey, Nicole, when do we get the buyer broker agreement signed in July? And the case is, okay, so I would say there's about, like, it is going to be signed. It is going to be signed. So again, it is coming. I am 99.9% certain. This is from my attorney, not from me, right? She's much smarter than I am. They're going to sign this, right? They don't put all this together and then the judge doesn't approve it. It's going to be approved, right? So again, you can wait till July, but if not, I'd be doing it right now. I'd be practicing. I would be getting used to delivering it. You got to change the way you roll, right? You're going to have your buyer presentation. You're going to, meet them, maybe do a Zoom with them, and you are going to explain to them. And then you're going to talk about the buyer broker agreement and why you have to have that. You have to have it. I mean, I don't know how, I don't know how I'm going to enforce it. Like, if someone signed it late before the first showings, we're probably never going to know. But I think, Shannon, it will be self-enforced. Why? Here's why. You don't want to be showing somebody a property that you don't have a buyer broker agreement with and then find out that that's the house they want to make an offer on and they're not paying any compensation. That would not be good, right? You're no one's going to work for free. We have to explain to the buyers how this works, right? So hopefully we can do that. That is what's going to be important. Getting good at presenting to the buyer, getting good at explaining why that buyer broker agreement, the buyer broker agreement is mandatory, right? Again, the seller pays their commission, the buyer pays their commission. If the seller happens to be, which I think they will, compensating you as buyer's agent, then that's what you're going to get paid, provided it is more than or equal to what you signed with the buyer. If it's less, then the buyer's going to make up the difference. All right, so Lacey, that's a great question. So the list, all these, and I, I know Lacey has some practical experience on this. So again, these agreements, right, both the listing agreement and the buyer broker agreement, they don't have a ton of teeth, especially the buyer broker agreement, right? Because to enforce it sometimes costs more than what we're going to get. So hopefully there's going to be, just like in the contract, let's hope this is where it ends up. So in the contract, right, if the buyer sues the seller and they win, the seller pays their attorney fees and court costs. Hopefully, that's what we're going to see here now, right? So that these agreements actually have some teeth and are enforceable, right? So again, now, Mr. Buyer, you didn't pay. Now, not only are you on the hook for the commission, right, but you're on the hook for our attorney fees. That would be awesome, but we don't know where that's going to go. We're not quite there yet. They're enforceable, but they're hard to enforce, John. I mean, technically they're enforceable, but what makes them difficult or not practical to enforce is because of the cost of litigating, right? Sometimes the cost of litigating it is more than you're going to receive in commission, so you don't do it. But I still think here's the thing, most people aren't looking to screw us over. It's more that commitment. It's more that transparency. It's more that you had that conversation with you. They signed it, right? Most people do the right thing in this world. Well, I mean, hey Tony, how are you? Yeah, I mean, everybody is again, like it goes back to I think Shannon's question about like if I don't have it, and I take somebody to a house that isn't offering a commission to the buyer's agent, like, why did I do that? Because I'm not gonna, I wasted my time. I didn't get anything. I didn't earn anything. Because then what? Then you're gonna tell them like, have a nice day? No, you're still supposed to work with them, and now you're not getting paid. That makes no sense. That's why you want the buyer broker agreement up front, explaining to that buyer that there's a good chance, right? Again, we don't have the data yet. All we have is knowing a couple of things. We know in Washington state, right? No real change, right? And we also know the mandatory offer of compensation has been eliminated, and we're not seeing like a plethora. We're not even seeing anywhere close to that. All the listings are still offering compensation. Why? Because for the seller, that is the best thing to do. Well, again, I mean, they can cancel with written notice. We could make that cancellation. I've seen them, where they have more length, more time. We have to see kind of what comes out. Hopefully, when they redo the forms, NAR and the State of Florida Realtor Association, they take this stuff into consideration and they make these, contracts stronger for us. That's going to be important. I think you can. Hey, Ed, I think you can still send people properties. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's when you're actually, if you read the agreement, it's when you're showing them that house, right? Before showing them that first property, meaning physically showing it to them, you need the buyer broker agreement signed. Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, I mean, that's what's there now, Jan, and that's what we're gonna, have. But again, as we talked about, The problem with it now, right? And again, we use the state of Florida form, we could modify it a bit, right? The problem is when the seller isn't willing to pay us any, right? That's where the problem comes. But again, hopefully there's not going to be too many of those. So we have to see first what type of form comes out. Yeah, yeah, right. I mean, again, maybe we can create a new one with the 418 million. Yeah, you figure, I mean, ugly, right? NAR, 418 million. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Hey, Keila, I understand. I mean, this is problematic. Some FHA buyers hardly have enough for down payment and even need to ask sellers for how do we address them on paying us? Well, I mean, I think how you're going to address them is you're going to tell them it's a mandatory law. You are required. There was just a settlement that requires that. And again, you're going to take it a step further. You're going to explain to them why working with the listing agent is dangerous, meaning the potential to overpay, because the listing agent really doesn't care about the buyer at the end of the day. So again, we're going to have to work through this. Again, I would be out there tomorrow if I'm you guys. And if you have a new buyer client, I would be sitting down with them. I'd have my buyer presentation. I'd be ready. And I would start, as we're kind of in this transition period, right? Maybe your first couple of presentations are a little clunky. They don't go quite as well. You're going to get better, right? This is just going to become how we have to do business. We will get good at it. I know it. How long should a buyer agreement last for? I think it should last for a year or longer, right? But again, it's how they cancel, right? And again, if you're having difficulty and you're not working with someone well, you want to let them out of it, right? It's only when they want to get out, only because they're looking to kind of go around you. That would be problematic. Open houses are fine. I mean, we're still able to hey, Christine, we're still able to meet people, at open houses. Phil uses the F word, free, right? Free leads, right? You can, hey, what are you doing Tuesday? Would you like to look at some properties with me? They say yes. You're going to get them before you take them out. You're going to sit down with them. You're going to present to them, right? You're going to present to them exactly what you're doing, how you're going to work with them, how you're going to be helping them, and how much you're going to be paid for that. Well, that's Sergi, great. No, that is changing. That is exactly changing. That is a benefit. That is a benefit. His question was statement was buyers work with multiple agents at the same time because there are no repercussions for them. I don't see that changing. It's going to change. You know why it's going to change? Because now you got that buyer broker agreement, as should every single agent. Every single agent, right? So again, they're really going to be unable to work with anybody else because they decided to work with you exclusively, at least for a certain amount of time. That was one of the things that came out. I didn't think of this, right? But that was one of the things that came out, in that article Steve was nice enough to send me, this exact point. So now you don't have to worry about that buyer, like, stiffing you or forgetting about you or going, no, you got them locked into you. That is good. Absolutely, Melissa. Teach our clients, right? Again, teach, educate, be transparent. No, nope, nope, nope. There is going to be no buyer agent compensation anywhere. That is out. That is outlawed. It's not going to be, those fields are not going to exist anymore in the MLS, right? You're not going to be able to, if you're the listing agent, you're not going to be able to put it in the public remarks. You're not going to be able to put it in the realtor remarks. I am almost 100% certain of that. That data, Zillow, Redfin, They used to get that data, they would put it on the listings. The buyers knew exactly how much. That is all going away, because the theory, if you go back to what the theory is the buyer pays you if you're working with them. Now, again, the seller can pay. It is okay. Thank God they didn't outlaw that. They could have done that. That could have been even worse. They could have said, sellers, you can no longer pay anything to the buyer's agent, zero. That didn't happen. That is not happening. They can still pay us. They don't have to pay us. They didn't have to pay us before. They could have paid us $1 before. But no, it can't really be anywhere. Unfortunately, that's what's being taken away. And again, because the concept is the buyer, at least initially, has agreed to pay you. If the seller is willing to compensate you, then that amount that they're compensating you can be reduced from what the buyer is paying. Yeah, absolutely. Buyer's agents often are more important, making sure their client doesn't pay, making sure they understand. Do you think about, I mean, I'm scared. I'm scared. What I'm scared of is like this for the public, right? We do a great job. We do a great job both with sellers and with buyers. Now, the potential for a buyer to be unrepresented, they don't even know to get a home inspection, some of them. Scary. We'll see what happens. Well, I think we all want to stick together in terms of, again, communicating our value, right? Having that buyer broker agreement, having a listing agreement, right? Those things, and again, I strongly advocate for sellers to continue to compensate the buyer's agent to help. They want to sell their house. They want to attract the most number of people to that home. And you do that by potentially compensating the buyer's agent. It is hey Alma, how are you? Good to see you. It is going to be extra negotiation, right? And now again, we don't know this 100%. You might be able to put right in the contract. We'll see what you're asking seller to pay 2.5%. No, it doesn't. No, Jason, absolutely not. Absolutely not. This does none of that. None of that. His question is, this kills the chance to double side. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Because again, whatever your agreement with that seller is, right? You might have something where it's 2.5, 5%. If you bring both sides, you get 5%. Maybe you have the variable rate commission, right? If I find a buyer, then I'm going to charge you 4%. So no, it doesn't kill that at all. All this does at the end of the day, is make things transparent. There is no, as I said, Dalton Way, we let agents charge what they want, but sometimes we'll see like, in the Facebook group, oh, they're charging 1.5%. You are ruining the business. You are ruining the industry. That mentality is out the window, because what that mentality is I deserve this. I'm due this. That is wrong. You deserve what you negotiate. You deserve what you can explain to either the buyer or the seller what you're worth. And if you do that and you do that well, you will have absolutely no problem. But it is that mentality, this kind of entitlement, we're entitled to this, is what has gotten us in trouble as an industry. Most likely buyers will just go to the listing agent directly. Maybe, maybe not. I'd be nervous. I'd be nervous if I'm a buyer working with the listing agent. I'm sure some of that's going to happen. but maybe not. Again, it comes down to explaining, to communicating, and what you're communicating to that buyer is why working with you as the buyer's agent is in their best interest financially. They have no representation for all intents and purposes when they work with the listing agent. A listing agent starts with the seller. They know their seller. Their allegiance is to the seller, even though technically, legally, they're a transaction broker and they're supposed to be neutral. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. And that's what needs to be communicated to buyers when you are the buyer's agent. You have to communicate that to them. How do we overcome a buyer wanting to look at our own listing since we are still a transaction? Hey, Mel, how are you? No, we are still a transaction broker. That is not changing, right? Buyers, have worked with the listing agents before. That happens. We're still a transaction broker. Really, the question more is when you're like, Dalton Wade, and I know a lot of you guys, we do a lot of internet leads, and we meet a lot of, how do we meet buyers, right? We get referred to them by past clients or people we know. We meet them at open houses. And then usually the other way is online, right? There are a lot of buyers shopping online, right? So again, sometimes buyers call the listing agent, want to deal with the listing agent. Are you the listing agent? You're still a transaction broker, right? So we can still get both sides. That is not changing. The transaction broker, kind of how we represent our client, that's all correct. That's all state of Florida laws. That is not changing at all. So you can show them, your listing. I don't know, like, again, if you're showing them the house, that's a good question. I'm going to check this. Do you need a buyer broker agreement with them? No, I don't know. There are still some subtleties to all this. This just happened a few days ago, so we're still all learning a bit, but the general takeaway, the general concepts, they are out there. All right. Well, yeah, absolutely. You can be a single agent for them now, right? A single agent, you offer more. The only thing is you can't be a single agent, right? If it's a Dalton Wade listing, then you have to transition, you have to be a transaction broker. But the key takeaway is the buyer broker agreement. You got to have that, right? That is the key thing. Sherry says she likes working as a single agent. In many states, Florida's kind of an odd duck, right? Where you can be a transaction broker. Most states you're a single agent. Some states don't have dual agency. What do they do in this case? That's not been discussed. Okay, so the MLS fee, that's a great question, John. There is no such thing as an MLS fee. Okay, no such thing. This is another misconception, lack of understanding. There is no such thing as an MLS fee. When you see 2.5% minus 295, that is a reduction in the commission you are receiving as the buyer agent. So it is all going to go away because none of that is going to be allowed in the MLS anymore. So there's going to be none of that. Those fields, right? Single agent, transaction broker, non-agent, 2.5% minus 295, 2.5% minus 295, zero for non. Those fields are gone. There's going to be none of that. That's all what's being eliminated. So yes, the MLS fee is going to go away, but really the MLS fee at the end of the day was a reduction in what they were offering you. I hate charging it, but yeah, I also hate paying. I hear you. It's going away. It's just a reduction in the commission is really what it was. Yeah, Hey, Alyssa, how are you? Yeah, we actually in dot loop, there is, the current buyer broker agreement provided by the state of Florida Realtors. It is there. It probably is going to be changing, as they come out with the new forms. Yeah, again, so Tony, just to hit on this one last time, there was none of that. That is not how, I had a guy actually, he's down your neck of the woods, call me. He's from like, some hooty tooty brokerage, and he's telling me, oh, I'm not paying that junk fee. I'm not paying that junk fee. I'm like, yeah, you are, because it's not a junk fee, it's a reduction in the commission. I'm going to have my broker call you. He goes, I'm going to have my broker. I never heard from his broker because the guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Think of it like this, and it's going away. But when you see the minus whatever amount of money it is, they are reducing your commission. That's all it is. It is not a fee. It is not a junk fee. It is not an MLS fee. It is a reduction in the commission. Well, that I see a sliding scale of compensation according, absolutely. New models might pop up, right? New models. Things might change. You might say to yourself, hey, this is what I do. I charge a flat fee of $7,500, no matter what the house is. I think on the buyer side, where the most pressure is going to happen is on those higher end homes, on those $2 million homes where 3% and you get 60 grand. Nice, nice. That's where you might see some pressure, right? Because did it take you more work to sell that $2 million house than it would have if you were selling a $500,000 home? Maybe a little more, but not 4 times more work. So there on that higher end, we could see some more, right? Flat fees, those are going to be legal, permissible. You as an agent, right? You got to come up with your own strategy, your own pricing. This is what, think about it. I mean, we got some time here, right? Think about what you're going to do and how you want to be. What is your model? What do I do? What is my value proposition? And what do I charge for it? Well, all right. So Brandon, how are you, Brandon? Good to see you. We could see buyers going straight through listing agent instead of going through buyer's agent. Most can barely afford the down payment and would be forced to go. That is a problem. That potentially is a problem. That's why there's been talk, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, HUD, FHA, VA, allowing buyers to roll the costs of the real estate agent into the loan. That would be better. Let's hope they do that, right? Because I think that would be helpful for the buyer. The buyer dealing directly with the listing agent is going to be difficult and problematic, I believe, in the end for buyers. That is the thing no one is talking about. No one is talking about. We want buyers to have a great experience. I want, yeah, right. Hey, Tony, absolutely. Those are the type of innovative models that are going to come out. Remember what I said, in Washington State where they've had this for quite a while, right? No noticeable reduction in commission. Overall, the pool of commission dollars is the same, is the same. Embrace this. Well, I think the thing, hey, Christine, I think the thing is, regarding open houses, like again, you can still meet buyers at open houses, right? It's a good thing. I love open houses. I met so many buyers that way, but it's when you're going to show them that first house, right? You are going to have that buyer broker agreement. And again, it's a positive. NAR is offering the accredited buyer. Yeah, absolutely. Take those, have those credentials. Could be, yep, could be that for sure. I think that's, that's certainly been discussed. Flat fee as opposed to a percentage, right? I mean, I think they'll just advertise that, however they're out there promoting themselves. I am an exclusive buyer agent. If you can do three, buyer agent contracts a month at 7,500 a pop, that's not bad. Hey, Kelly, let's see. Kelly says Zillow partnership is a concern with getting a buyer to sign a BBA before they know a thing about you. My success with Zillow has always been built on the first meeting and building the trust. Also, there are real-time touring options. That's a great question. I think again, you're going to sort of let's decouple, kind of your statement here, right? So again, Kelly's been awesome on Zillow. She does really well. She meets a lot of buyers that way. So again, before you tour them, right, you're going to have to meet them first, right? And again, maybe it's there, maybe you show them the first house, then you get it signed, but it's got to be signed, like again, are you going to open the door? Yeah, I mean, there's going to be the reality of all this. I mean, Phil's going to tell you you need to have that signed, right? But again, it comes down to, again, let's see what she says. My success with Zillow has always been built on the first meeting and building the trust. Well, you're still going to do that. You're going to build that trust when you meet them, right? You're going to build that trust by communicating that what you're going to do in a presentation. It's just taking when you pull out that buyer broker agreement sooner than later, right? And again, let's hope everybody's going to do that, all buyers agents. So it's going to be an equal playing field. It's not like they're going to find some other buyer that's going to show them some houses without it. We don't know. But again, I wouldn't get nervous. I mean, again, we're going to learn. We're going to see what happens. I mean, if you talk to 10 Zillow leads and, you knew from previous experience, 8 of them would go out with you and now you're springing the buyer broker agreement and you see some large fall off, then we got to come up with something different, meaning how we're communicating to them. Hey, Bo, procuring costs will be implemented. I mean, again, there are some logistics to all this in terms of, obviously making sure we're getting paid, is what's going to be in the listing agreement if the buyer does, excuse me, if the seller does want to compensate, the buyer's agent. How are we going to enforce the BBA? Well, Serge, I haven't really thought about it. I would imagine when you send in your file, we're gonna need it. It's gonna be now part of it. Did you show them one house before you got it signed? Hopefully you didn't, but are we ever gonna know that as the brokerage? Probably not. Hey, Carolyn, I've been talking a lot, so I'm not sure exactly which question. I'm just kind of going through these in order. So if you want to type it in again, I'm happy to, to answer. Let's see who said that the list. I mean, maybe they will. Maybe they're going to get 2.5, 3%, and they're willing to do that. I mean, what I think we're going to see, and it's going to be on both sides, is some different models are going to pop up. There's going to be some different models. There's going to be some flat fee buyer representation, right? There's going to be some listing agents that maybe tell their client, hey, pay me 2.5%, and I'll find the buyer. You don't have to, and maybe he ends up, you know, then the buyer's agent has to pay. Hard, hard to know. Hard to know. Only time will let us know. But again, what I'm going back on is what happened in Washington, in terms of really at the end of the day, two things really. One, the mandatory offer of compensation has been gone for 6 months. We're not seeing it. We're not seeing really any change in listings still offering, if you're the listing agent, you want to sell that house, right? That's your goal, right? That's what your seller is hiring you for. When I was a listing agent, I just wanted to get it sold and move on to the next client. I'm not like, if I got the buyer, I think I double sided like, 1% of my deals. It just didn't happen for me. BBAs are hard to enforce, Kelly. They are, and again, we talked about that. It has to, and again, maybe, and I'm hoping they change the verbiage so it's a little bit more. It's not that it's hard to enforce; it's the cost to enforce it. Just like I said, and when a buyer and seller like sign the contract, right, and then one of them, the other one has a problem and they sue, they allow them to sue because the other side is on the hook. Hopefully that will be the same here, right? So that it's written, hey, Mr. Buyer, if you don't pay us in the end, not only are we going to sue you, but you're going to pay our attorney's fees. Then it is much more enforceable. But we have to see what happens. It's possible, it's hard to know. Um, it's hard to know everything at this time. I think we're going to see some, we're going to learn, what happens, how this is all going to work. It's going to be new, you know, for the next, 3 to 4 months, and then it'll become clearer, and we'll start to know. And as I said, this is, we're going to be doing several of these because as we learn, as more information comes out, this is just the first. Hey, Lisa, I have no idea. I mean, they might. Obviously, if you're not getting any compensation, then their fee is not going to be, much of anything, right? I mean, but again, the whole concept is that you have that buyer broker agreement, right? So you are guaranteed of getting paid. Have I taken buyers around and gotten stiffed? Absolutely. 2 or 3 times come specifically to mind because I didn't have the buyer broker agreement. That's over. That's never going to happen to us as a buyer's agent ever again. That is a positive. That is true. Hey, Gigi, yep, the judge does need to approve the settlement, but again, I'm thinking 99.9%, he's on board. He already agreed, there was the Caldwell Banker, Century 21, Sotheby's, when they settled, that's agreed. Remax, that's been, this is for all intents and purposes, it's a done deal. They don't get to this point without knowing, that this is going to be approved. I would be shocked. Could happen, but it's the odds are very, very low. No, so again, Lisa, you potentially are not making less. Those are the thoughts you got to get out of your head. You got to get that out of your head. You're not making less. It's just somebody different is potentially paying you. Those those were the problems. That's where the problems occurred. That's where the court, the judge, the plaintiff's attorneys, that's where they all think like we make money for free. That is not true. That is not true. Hey Tony, any chance Florida? It is possible. I talked to some of the boards, and maybe, what does NAR really do? Maybe we need, the local board, state of Florida, that's enough. Who needs NAR? What do they do for us? I am not a fan. All right, again, I knew this was going to come up. I knew, and again, like you just heard me say, I'm not a fan of NAR, but let me tell you there's a few positives, right? All the forms, all the contracts, everything we deal with, all the standardization of that is all provided by the Florida Realtor Association, right? They have that. The lockbox system, that is all through them. So they do some good things. We have to see, they're not all negative. NAR, not really sure what their benefit is, but again, a lot of this is evolving. We have to see what happens. I'm all for no longer paying NAR as well. But we have to see how this goes. I have no idea. I have not heard anything about NAR fees. I don't know that we can really do anything. I think that's kind of beyond our scope of, being able to, kind of influence the judge. I sort of know I can't do that. Oh yeah, the only, that's what really needs to be reformed is this whole process. The only people that make out in this are the plaintiff attorneys. They're gonna get, I've added up, they've already probably got close to 600 million in damages, and they're not done. Some of the larger brokerages, Redfin, EXP, and I'm hoping to God, I believe Dalton Wade is gonna be under, the cutoff of 2 billion in 2022 sales so we can be part of the settlement. But there's a bunch of brokerages that are not going to fall under that, and they're going to have to pay. So there's going to be more paid in, and the plaintiff attorneys are going to be the ones that get all the money. At the end of the day, they're going to get, several $100 million. There you go, Joyce. I mean, that's it. That is it. That you nailed it. Right? That's again, right? Yeah. And sometimes people think, and I talked about this in the beginning, it's not the commission. Obviously, that's what we get paid. Stay away from focusing on that. Focus on what the seller is, that you're going to get their house sold and how much money they're going to get, not the commission. A good agent, do you think like a for sale by owner, I'll use that. If a for sale by owner gets 3 offers, is he going to do highest and best and drive up the price? I would say the chances of that are zero. He's going to take whatever he thought was the best offer, but maybe some of those other 2 offers would have paid him 10 or 15 or 20 grand more. Let's see, Nicole. So what's is saying is for only difference is listing agents not telling buyer's agent. Right, that is really the only difference. You don't know up front, and why they've done that is because of the steering. Right, there is now really no ability to steer your client because you don't know. Right, and you're being paid. If you are getting nothing from the seller, you are being paid by the buyer. So you don't care. You'll take them to that house that isn't offering anything because they're paying. That's the concept. That's where we got in trouble. Can you believe? I was shocked when I read this. Certain MLSs, you could sort the listings by what they paid you. I can see why that might be a benefit for agents, but is that a benefit for their customer, for the buyer? Absolutely not. Those are the things that were problematic. Lawyers will get a lot of money. Absolutely. Well, again, Gigi, I have checked on this. We don't have to be part of NAR to access the MLS, but then, we're not going to be part of the lockbox system. We don't have access to the forms, right? So there are some things that, we're not going to, one thing that I rely on very heavily is the legal hotline. That's all gone away. Those are all things that are provided by the state of Florida Realtor Association. So there are some benefits that help us do our job. Thank you, Maria. I love it. I don't think we are getting paid a lesser commission. That I think that we need to sell our services in a stronger, clear way that can, I couldn't have said it better. Thank you. Christina likes this. Can we just have the BB? No, because again, you don't want that, Christina. You don't want to do it like that. I know you think that and you think it's easier, but here's the thing. When you put the offer in, right, and they're not offering you any money, why do you want to work with them? You're not going to get paid. This way, you know you're getting paid. And again, you can communicate to the seller and we'll have hard data, more hard data as time goes on, right? That 98% of sellers are offering a commission. You're only signing this is because you kind of have to for me to show you the house. All right, we'll leave Nicole's comment alone. I get it. So if I have a buyer sign a buyer's agreement and they will pay me a flat fee or percentage if the home they choose paying the buyers. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You just explained that's how the form is going to be written. So if you get, so they're going to, so if the seller is paying you more, you can capture more. I believe I have to read the fine print. But if the seller is paying you less, the buyer, makes up the difference. The buyer broker agreement, given kind of the new landscape, ensures we get paid is really what it comes down to. And why we would want to work with somebody that's not willing to pay us, I'm not sure why we would do that. Hey, Brett, at what point does a buyer's agent know what commission, if any, they are receiving? Personally, I would not probably be calling every listing and asking. I would only be, I take and show the property. If you think, hey, they're getting ready to submit an offer, I would want to call. Maybe they tell you not, they're not offering anything. Then, you put it in the contract. I believe we'll be able to do that. Got to get some more clarity on that, right? It's all going to be negotiable now. It's all negotiable. Maybe your buyer would have paid, $390 if the seller's paying your commission, but now since they're paying your commission, which we'll just use 10 grand, they're only going to offer 380. Hey, Susan, we have to find out. That is still her first question. VA finance buyers kind of touched upon this or not. We have to see. Hopefully that's going to change. That obviously is going to be problematic, because we do work with a lot of VA buyers. So let's see. There has been some talk that buyers will be able to roll the agent's commission into the loan. Let's see if that actually comes into play. Nope, no, 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 nope, no, there's gonna be none of that. Everything that is, at least in theory, that it's gonna be somewhere else, it's gonna be on Showing Time, it's gonna be on some other website. No, that is all the data, right? All the data that's out there regarding commissions, that's in the public domain, comes from MLS. And since MLS is no longer going to have any of that data, there will be none of that data out there. So there will be no, and again, it doesn't matter because the buyer has agreed to pay you. In the event there is no commission. If there is a commission, then the seller is still going to pay you. That's what they're getting rid of. It serves two functions. One, right, is that whole steering thing, right, where agents steered their clients to, wouldn't show them, listings that, had a low buyer agent commission. Now it doesn't matter. So they got rid of that. So no, there won't be some other site out there that's gonna, let us know what the buyer agent commission is. How long should we put the buyer agent agreement for? I put it for as long as humanly possible. Hey, hi, how are you? Good to see you. That's what I would, a year, 18 months, you never know. Hey, Andrea, probably gonna go into effect sometime in July. They said 4 months. Again, as we get closer, I'm sure there will be an exact date coming. What are we supposed to do now? I mean, what I would be doing is, obviously you're still able to see the data, on the MLS, right? Again, do your own research, look at 100 listings and see what you come up with. When I looked at them, over the weekend, I looked, I think, at 250 listings. I didn't find one where there was no buyer agent commission. And I found, actually, I was shocked. I saw more 3% where they're offering 3% than I ever thought I would, right? So again, it's kind of business as usual, except this. I strongly recommend to everybody, when you're working with that buyer, you want to get in the habit now of doing the buyer presentation, having them sign. Like Elba, she doesn't have to worry about any of this because she's already doing it. This is nothing new for her. Maybe Elva can come on and she can be a presenter with me and she can explain what she does, how she gets them to sign that. I'm sure over the years she has developed quite a knack of doing that. That's what you guys need to do. You need to embrace this. You need to figure it out. It's just like, when I did my first webinar, I sucked. Excuse my French. I was terrible, but then I got better, right? So maybe your first buyer consultation, a true one, where you're going to ask them to sign that, maybe it's going to be clunky, but you're going to fix it. And then the next one's going to be better. And the third one's going to be better, right? You're going to get better because that's the world we're in. Embrace it. Okay, we talked about this a little bit, the VA buyers. Again, right? Maybe you go to the listing agent and say, hey, I got a VA buyers. Your seller, if the rules don't change, is the seller willing to, pay me anything? See what they say. Well, yeah, no, I know, Tony. I mean, again, some of the more finer points, we just have to see kind of how this plays out. I mean, this is, you know, again, we don't know everything right now, but things will become clearer, as time goes on. Will says, I need help with the percentages. Can you expand on that a little bit, Will? We'll get back to that. No, we don't need a new buyer's agreement for each showing. One buyer. Hey, Janet, how are you? One is good. We have it. It's going to cover us on all. Hey, Lorianne, we talked about the VA loans. Let's see. Can the buyer broker agreement be simple? Possibly. We have to see what they come up with. Hi, Nikki. That is a great question. How are we going to know that a listing agent is telling? Well, one would assume that, he's got something written, and then hopefully, there is a thing called honesty, and we're supposed to be honest, right, at all times in what we do. I mean, I think, we talked a little bit about this, how are we going to enforce the fire? Again, from Dalton Wade compliance, I'm thinking all we're really going to do is make sure we have one. Did you get it signed at the first showing? How are we ever really going to know that? So there's going to be some, self-policing, and again, why you want it, right, is because if you don't have it and you show them that house and they like that house and the seller's not willing to compensate you, you're not going to get paid. So you really want it. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, Bianca, 100%. None of that is changing. Again, the seller can still compensate the buyer's agent. It's the vast majority will do that. I know it. Because again, They've already been able to charge zero. That's not happening. Washington State, these rules and practices have been in place for a number of years. Commissions haven't changed. So absolutely, they haven't done like that would have been the nuclear bomb. That would have been so much worse if they had outlawed, and there was talk of that, if they had outlawed the seller for paying anything for the buyer. Right. So, hey, Gina, so if sellers want to pay a buyer's agent, can they request in order to get the fee? Agent must accompany all appointments. Yeah, I mean, again, I mean, do you think if you're a listing agent, you're going to want to be like opening doors for that buyer and showing them? I don't know. I don't know. I just, at the end of the day, my personal opinion is things are not going to change. There's going to be some logistics. Things are going to be a little bit different, but they're not going to be, I just don't see it changing all that much. I really don't. Yeah, absolutely. That is exactly what it's going to be, Brett. That is exactly how it's going to be written. With new construction, hey Carla, how are you? With new construction, it's going to be the same. Yeah, I mean, again, they're going to have to be offering something. Yeah, I think a lot of it is going to depend on, the demand out there. When it was very, very busy during the pandemic, we saw Lennar offering 1%. Now they're back to 3%. So again, right, it's going to be, based on the demand. They're selling their properties like hotcakes and they don't need a buyer's agent, right, so much, then they're going to probably offer less. Maybe they move to a flat fee model, the builders. Who knows? We will see. I haven't heard that about NAR and their fees going up, so I'm not sure. It's probably going to go into effect the middle of July. We don't have an exact date. I don't have a hey Sonia, I don't really have a recommendation. It's whatever you think is best for you based on your experience, what you bring to the table. Maybe if you're a newer agent, right, and you don't have a ton of experience, maybe you're willing to charge a little less to get that experience. Maybe you're experienced, seasoned, you're going to help that buyer, you're going to charge them, 2.5, 3%, or a flat fee. That's pretty close to that. Nobody works for free. That's one of the problems I've had with NAR. They've done a terrible job explaining what we do, our value, and why we get paid what we get paid. People think we get free money. There's nothing further from the truth. And that's the whole problem. When I listen to this plaintiff attorney on a couple of, podcasts and news, he's like, oh, it's like, like you go do this work and you see how much work it is and what we can do and how we help. All right, Catherine's asking, what documentation do we need after this phone call with the listing agent to confirm compensation? We have to see. I mean, I think that's one of the things that, we can't be 100% certain of right at the moment. I mean, it's either going to be, I think this will become clearer, once the forms, get regenerated. Yeah, I mean, I think they can do that. I mean, obviously, we want to make sure that, what they're telling us, we in fact ultimately end up getting paid. I mean, I think that was another positive thing about the MLS is we always knew we would get paid what was in MLS. So we have to kind of see the logistics, of how that is going to work. There is a buyer broker agreement in dot loop, absolutely. Okay, this is a good one. All right, as a listing agent, we will now have to discuss the buyer's agent commission with the seller. Absolutely. And again, Wade, we should have always been doing that, right? We should have always been doing that. That is something we should always have, right? I mean, again, they have to decide, right? And you have to give them your professional experience as to why or why not you think that buyer's agent should get what they get. Oh, I want to offer them 3% because I really want to motivate them to bring their client here. And when they call me and they say, what are you offering? I want to tell them the most possible. That might be a strategy. Those are the things you guys have to figure out. What is best for you, how you are going to communicate that. Marcy, good question. I mean, I think it would be best. I think there's more teeth when we tell them we're a single agent, right? There's more duties, there's more responsibilities, we're more committed to them. With a transaction agent, there might be less. That might be, again, a selling point, to that buyer in your presentation, right? These are the things you got to kind of think through and ultimately work out. Yeah, you can definitely. Hi, Rima. How are you? Yeah, we can inquire, right? We can ask. Absolutely. Hey, Costa, will Zillow set up access for listing agents bypassing NAR? No, I don't see that happening at all because yeah, Zillow could go out of business, right? Zillow, if this goes, let's say this goes badly, and we're hoping it doesn't, and there's no indication it will. But if all of a sudden you're getting leads from Zillow and they're not willing to sign that buyer agent agreement with you, guess what? You're canceling on Zillow because it's worthless. Doesn't mean anything anymore. So we have to see how that plays out. Yeah, I mean, exactly. The seller, it's all going to have to be in the listing agreement, right? It's all going to be in there, right? Whether they're paying nothing or they're paying, 2.5% to the buyer's agent, right? But again, we have to see the forms to be 100% certain. No, we're not. We're not. Hey, Rosie, good to see you. No, we cannot add the commission in the showing time remarks. Absolutely. Again, the theory is that all that information is not needed because you don't need it because you have the buyer broker agreement. Will it be in the private remarks? No. Nope. There will be none. No. Nope. It will be nowhere. There will be none of that. Because again, it did a couple things. It caused steering, right? That's why they're agreeing to this, right? It caused agents to show listings that they weren't representing. They're representing themselves. They're looking to make the most money, right, by showing them certain properties at the expense of other properties that didn't pay as much that their buyer might have liked better. How it's going to be set up now, that's not possible. That's not possible. And that is a good thing. This is what got us in trouble. Again, the settlement, when you add it all up, it's probably going to be 750, $800 million. Like something went wrong here. And again, NAR has been under pressure for years, all around this, all around, collusion, anti-competitive, antitrust violations. And somehow they always manage, for whatever reason, to keep it going, keep it going. And they tried right until the end. and they lost. They got their clock cleaned. They got killed. They suck. Sorry. I would think the listing agent will be inundated with calls about, again, hey, Jessica, that is possible. We don't, again, I think some of them these more like, I call them like finer points, right? Like, are they going to be, we're going to find out. This is all happened 4 days ago. So we're going to find out, we're going to see, it'll clear itself. We'll find a way, right? We're going to get through this. Hopefully, we're not going to see a 30% reduction in commission. Do you think I want that to happen? Absolutely not. Nobody wants that. All I can go on is what I see, what data I have now. I have 2 data points right now. I looked at the listings. The mandatory offer of compensation's been gone for 6 months. I still see everybody offering, right? I still see sellers wanting to. Now, again, our agents, listing agents communicating that, really being explicit, letting their clients know. I don't know. I'm not there on those appointments. And then again, what happened in Washington State? That's a good benchmark, right? They've had these rules. There's the commission pie didn't evaporate by 30%. That's all hype. That's hysteria, right? Nobody knows. It could, it might, I could be totally wrong. I'm not feeling it though. I'm not thinking that's what's going to happen. Possible. I mean, we could possibly, again, I think some of these more finer points of like an addendum, how we're going to get paid, they're going to, trust me, they're going to communicate that to us. They're not, NAR as much as, we're kind of throwing them under the bus, rightfully so. Them, state of Florida, they're going to help us through this. They're going to come up with things. They're going to come up with the new forms. They're going to tell us these are general parameters that we are now working under. Okay, yep. So Susan, you have my commitment that I got your back, that I will be there. Now, here's the thing. I say that only with one preference, right? If what it costs, right, us to enforce that buyer broker agreement is more than the commission, then we have to ask ourselves, is that a good business decision, right? Hopefully what we're going to see, hopefully what's going to happen in that new buyer broker agreement, we'll have to see, is that in fact, if we do have to litigate, the buyer then is on the hook for our attorney costs. Then absolutely, absolutely. But it's not so much my decision as it is yours, right? If what you find out and when we talk to the attorney and they tell us, gee, it's going to cost more to litigate than what the commission is, and we're not going to be reimbursed for, the attorney's fees, it kind of makes it hard to want to litigate. I hope that answered your question. But theoretically, if they add that in where the buyer is then on the hook for our attorney fees, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's see here. Hey, Lisa, yep, we will be doing a class. We will talk about that. I think we have to get the new one really to sort of see what that's going to be, just to kind of make sure that, kind of doing it now might be a bit early, but as soon as, the new form comes out, absolutely. How would I counsel seller about the benefits of paying a buyer's agent? Very simply, that we want as many buyers to come here, right? We do not want to be, precluding anybody. The more you offer, right, the higher probability that someone is going to bring their client by. Plus, I would also, throw in, what a buyer's agent does, right? Especially again, if you're charging, let's just use 5%, right? I mean, I don't think we should be out there, and it's 2.5, 2.5, and maybe if we have both sides, it's 4. There's work. Like, people just think this is all like free money. It's not. It's not. We all work. I mean, I remember when I was in production, I worked my tail off. Did I get paid every time? No. No. Did I list houses and then they didn't sell? Yeah, that happened. Did I work with buyers and they didn't buy? Yeah. Well, I mean, I still spend time, right? So again, I just don't see the system in terms of like that there's going to be this radical change in terms of the compensation pool. Yeah, there will be right on the buyer broker agreement, our fee will be there. Let's see. Well, again, we have to see kind of but ask I mean, I think we have to kind of see what the new form is. Can we stay down page 12? Seller will contribute. I believe that's going to be permissible going forward, Lisa. I know that's not permissible now. We have to see. I know we don't actually sign the contract, meeting Dalton Wade. I think questions like, so Lisa's asking, can we stay on page 12? So I'm sure she's referring to the additional terms. Seller will contribute, right? You know, again, those are things that are going to become clear once we get a little further into this. I mean, somebody calling off your sign if you're the listing agent? Gabrielle, I think that's what she means. I'm not sure. Like, those are questions like I haven't thought about. Then do you need a buyer broker agreement? Like, if you're working direct, like you're the listing agent and you're now working with a buyer, do you need a buyer broker agreement from them? I gotta find that out. I don't know. Those are, not everything is known, right? Because we don't have the forms. It's just happened. So there's gonna be some, fine tuning of everything, as we kind of get into it. We show clients house after house and they decide to wait. How do we get paid? No, you're probably not gonna get paid. You wouldn't have gotten paid now. You wouldn't have gotten paid now. I mean, again, if we have a buyer broker agreement and then we have a contract and then they back out, are we entitled to get paid then? Those again are things we have to wait and see how it goes and find out. We don't have all the answers tonight. Well, as I think I mentioned, Haley's asking about the buyer broker. It is a valid question. I mean, it is as it stands now, it is a difficult agreement to enforce because of the fact when you litigate, it is very expensive, right? So the cost to litigate becomes more than the cost of more than the commission we receive. So hopefully, again, call the Florida Legal Hotline and mention this, or whoever we have to, kind of put our 2 cents in here. They need something that says our attorney fees will be compensated, will be paid by that buyer. Then we can litigate against them if they stiff us, if they don't pay us. Because now we have teeth. We have something that will allow us to be paid. All right, we'll go a few more minutes. Let's see, do we need a signed agreement from someone before we go under contract regarding commissions? I mean, if you're working with the buyer, Vanessa, again, I mean, I think some of these kind of, more subtle differences in terms of like what we're gonna need, how we're gonna get paid, what the logistics of that all is something, we will be finding out over the next few weeks to months. But I guarantee you, when they roll out the forms, they are gonna we will have a much better understanding of kind of how the mechanics of this is all going to work. Hey, John, I think that's a great question. So again, I think it goes back to that buyer broker agreement as it stands now. It would be difficult given kind of that 2% probably all gets eaten up, in attorney fees. Hopefully they're going to change that so that that has some teeth, right? And, the buyer is then on the hook for not only the 2%, but our attorney fees, just like it is in the contract. The prevailing party is able to collect court costs and attorney fees. We can still offer variable commissions to the seller. Absolutely. Hey, Karen, how are you? I don't see this affecting open houses at all, other than, that we need to, before we actually show somebody a house, if we're taking them out as a client, to see something different, that we have that buyer broker agreement. Hey Gigi, I would doubt it's going to be verbal because verbal really isn't worth very much. We'll do a few more questions. Let's see. If talked about this, what if the buyer doesn't want to pay? Can they put that they are offering in the agent remarks? No, we can't do that. Would you put the buyer broker compensation requested from the seller in the offer? We have to kind of, hey, Mitch, we have to, again, that's something we're going to find out. Might be possible to do that. Hopefully it's going to be. We have to see what their kind of recommendation, is on that. I mean, everybody wants us to be paid. Trust me, NAR, the state of Florida, the board, Phil, nobody wants anybody working for nothing. We just have to have the right documentation, to protect our interests. Again, it's a great question, Christina. I don't have an answer. I mean, I think, we'll kind of go back and look at these and, we'll get these answers, find out. I mean, I think there's been a few of them tonight that, they're unknown. I mean, not everything is known right today, but I think as we get closer, to kind of full implementation, we're going to know. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, again, inform your lender. If your lender's chatting with the client, the lender, your kind of preferred lender, hopefully they're going to be advocating for you, explaining. I mean, the more explanation, the more, positive, the buyer broker can, be, the better. It possibly could. Again, Christina, we don't know whether, they're going to allow the, buyer's agent commission to be. I know there's been talk of that. Hopefully that will, occur. We don't know that yet. Absolutely, Dennis. The buyer initially is responsible for the commission, right? That's what's going to take out of the equation the steering. It is also going to make sure that you get paid in the event that the seller, for whatever reason, isn't offering anything. Hey, Susie, I would think you're going to give that buyer agreement to the, to the title company, and they're going to see that. And it's going to be right on the settlement statement, and they're not going to be able to close. Again, I'm not an attorney. I can't tell you 100% for sure that that's how it's going to work, but that's how I think it would. It's a good question. We would have to go after them. We would have to pursue them. We would have to legally pursue them, right? Which is possible now. The only problem now, given the way the buyer broker agreement is written, is it doesn't have any teeth. So, let's see what, let's see what, I think hopefully this is going to become clearer once the forms are out. I think right now we're just kind of, we're guessing and we don't really know. So again, smart people, lawyers are going to be drafting those forms. So hopefully, they're going to be clear and they're going to protect our interests. Or we'll come up with something different. We'll come up with one, I'll check with our attorney. I'm not sure we're required to use the Florida form on the buyer broker agreement. We'll come up with something that says, the buyer pays our attorney fees if we have to take them to court. Again, I mean, that's possible that the lender could do that, but I mean, again, that's a 0.5%, so that's not probably enough. I mean, that came out of their commission. I think that's what's happening. I mean, I think a lot of this is still unknown. I mean, I think during, kind of the time we're out there, I mean, it's nothing has changed as of today. That's how you should view it, other than you should really start to think that change is coming. Something is, especially on that buyer broker agreement, that's going to be different. Start implementing that now. Get comfortable using that. Don't wait right till the end. All right, we'll go another couple minutes here. Yeah, I mean, again, Janet, I mean, the lender may contribute. It's just how much can they contribute? I mean, they don't, they can't contribute 3% towards your commission unless, the buyer's paying probably a much higher than market rate loan. Again, I think, Nicole, we need to kind of see what that final buyer broker agreement looks like before we kind of start, again, like, yeah, you could ask for an upfront fee. I mean, a retainer, that's certainly legal. I don't see that being a problem. Again, it's not you asking, it's Dalton Wade asking. Everything has to come to Dalton Wade. Um, we will definitely work on that, Sonia. We will kind of, refine the, buyer presentation and then come up with some scripts to help you guys. Absolutely. Give us a little time, but we will work on that for sure. So right now we can't put that in the offer, Nicole. We have to kind of see what, how we're advised, as, this kind of rolls out. All right, couple more questions. Yeah, I mean, I hear you, Gigi. I mean, Zillow wants you to meet the client. I mean, absolutely. But again, I think, you're gonna just have to have that discussion. Maybe it's at the first property, but the goal would be to get that, that buyer broker agreement, signed, communicated. You've explained to them, and again, if this is implemented across the board, it's not like you're gonna be doing this in a vacuum, right? I kind of go back to Elba, and probably if I would have known, maybe I have her as a panelist, the next time we meet. Um, Obviously, she gets all her buyers to sign it. She's doing something. Agents do that. There are agents I know, they don't take somebody out unless they have that. They're not fooling around. They're not, now it's commitment. It's that buyer committing to you. Let's find out what she does, how she does it. All right, guys, we've gone 2.5 hours. I thought it wouldn't quite be this long, but a lot of great questions, a lot of information, not everything known. Um, We will, as I said, we will go through this together. There will be more of these webinars. So, we're just in the beginning. As far as where we are right now, just keep going. Nothing really has changed out there as of today. We have to see kind of what happens once everything gets implemented. There'll be more clarity. But if there's any takeaway, if you are working with buyers, start to use that buyer broker agreement. It is coming. It will be mandatory. Get good at using it and get good at presenting it to your clients. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. We will be in touch. Enjoy your evening. Thank you so much. Good night.